Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics. Welcome to Speaking of Reliability. This is Fred Schenkelberg.
And this is Dianna Dini.
Hey, Dianna. That was fun talking to G the other day, you know?
Yeah, it was.
It was, made me think that you need to get out more and talk to people sometimes, you know, but there's that.
Because I'm talking about the use case of talking to AI to get unstuck.
Yeah, well, no, I'm just teasing.
Well, you know, my husband used it to have a conversation on a long car ride about something. I don't know what it was.
Well, the snippet we got, it could go all over the place. I think G was perfectly happy to talk about this, that, and the other thing, and whatever direction you wanted to go, it would be fine. And then
well, you know, that's true, and she wouldn't get tired like some other people might, right?
Yeah. But one of the things that in that conversation, and it sparked a memory in talking to Greg Hutchins a couple of episodes ago. And Greg and I were talking about just influence and techniques and procedures and methods and stuff. Is if you really need to influence somebody else in the organization, what are some, hints and tips and approaches to going to do that? And it made me think that, we were talking with G about the 8D process, and we have a failure and we want to get to the root cause and we want to get some fixes in place. And we have this procedure that's fairly commonly used in various forms. The worst process I've seen of 8D is they called it a 7D. I said, what step are you skipping? We don't need no parties. And well, that's no fun.
Yeah, but it's no fun, and it's sort of a mistake.
Yeah. And it was endemic in the organization. They had lots of mistakes. The process of 8D is full of facilitation and just even brainstorming possible issues to go solve, or what do we know and don't know, and what are possible ways this could go, and what information do we need to do, and so on. That often takes a pretty skilled facilitator to avoid jumping to a conclusion or, moving too fast on an unsubstantiated, issue without in trying to get to some consensus and trying to get, a common approach, here's what people are going to pick up and go do and follow up on. That's a role that reliability folks typically, and quality folks to a large degree, are not trained on being a facilitator in the people side of stuff, right?
But we're called in to do that stuff quite a bit.
And FMEAs is another example, and, just all kinds of stuff like that. And part of it, though, is that we also bring in, one, the knowledge of the process. Two is we also bring in information about how things fail. We bring in information about setting up experiments like hypothesis tests or data analysis techniques and so on. So we're not off, even though we're in the role of facilitator, we often have to put on our statistician hat or put on our, data analyst hat or the failure analyst hat and say, well, this is the evidence. This is the information. This is where the science says this is what happens, or here's the comparison. It's significant, and this is clear that this experiment shows that this is the same or not, or whatever. We have to step out of being the facilitator sometimes. And that, to me, has always been tricky. So I wanted to ask you about that, because I suspect you've been in this kind of role, facilitator role, yet also having to step over to be an influencer also.
Yeah, you have to be careful. Sometimes facilitation is sort of like coaching.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to be careful that you're not stepping on the process and pushing other people's ideas or inputs out of the way in favor of your own that you feel pretty strongly about. And sometimes that takes the form of asking leading questions. Like well, you said it could be this part, but what about this part over here that, we've had some complaints about? What do you think about that? Instead of just saying, well, I've heard there's a lot of complaints over here about this part. Maybe this is also part of the solution.
Well, yeah, I've run into that where I find it is that, well, let's just brainstorm. What are all the possible things? And then I find myself consciously saying, let's look at number 3 over here.
Yeah. You immediately hone in on the one that, I don't know, your spidey sense tingles, right?
Yeah. Or whatever. It being part of the team and part of the engineering process it's difficult. In everybody in the group is that way, that everybody's going to have their own approach to it. And that's the hard part, is stepping back and saying, all right, now we got to do that. Yet at some points, one technique I learned years and years ago is that if you're facilitating, but you want to step into the discussion because let's say it's a hypothesis test that's being proposed or a comparison, and says, oh, okay, I'm the statistician in the room, so I'll help design this test. And what I was told to do was physically say, well, let me step into my statistics role or my engineering role and make the motion like to take your facilitator hat off and physically move to a different spot in the room. Take a step one way or the other and say, all right, now I'm an engineer, or now I'm a statistician, right? Here's my thought. And when you're done with that conversation or that piece of it, is put your facilitator hat back on and move back to the facilitator position. And I found trying that, it was really difficult to not violate being a facilitator in spot number A versus being an engineer in spot number 2. And when I was we're getting in a great conversation, I'd say, all right, throw this hat off. And by the time I'm halfway over to my engineer spot, I'm already halfway through my discussion. And that kind of destroys the separation in a very tangible way to the rest of the group. So over years, I got better at it. And then I said, the hell with this. I'm just a statistician. Let somebody else facilitate it.
Well, wait a minute. Now, you said you would physically move locations.
Yep.
So are you saying that it worked when it worked for yourself? Like, would you tell the other people in the room what you were doing too? Mm-hmm. Or,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, I'm going to take off my facilitator hat and let me address this as the engineer. And I wasn't wearing a hat, but I'd, put that on the table, and I would take a step sideways to a different spot where I was usually, or I would stand up if I was sitting down, or vice versa. I would physically change my location, take a breath, and then say, as an engineer or as a statistician, as whatever, and then what my input was. And then when I was done, it says, let me become the facilitator again. I'd walk over and I'd pick up my imaginary hat and put it on and take a breath and then say, all right, the next step is.
So you think that did help,
oh, yeah.
But it was still difficult to do.
Especially in the heat of the moment where there's, it's the discussion's going quick and everything else. It's, at one point they were I think the team was actually seeing how fast I could move between the two positions. So I think they were playing with me on that.
So at one point you were on a Segway.
That's right.
Just racing from one side of the meeting room to the other.
That's it. Yeah. I needed a clone, right. Now you talk. It's a dilemma, and it puts, it's a challenge to facilitate in general, and it takes practice and everything else. And then you add in this complication that you're facilitating with peers, and you have a seat at the table as a contributor of information and opinion and approach and insights and so on. And the first thing I learned about facilitation is you guard the process. Everybody's heard. And when you're have an opinion about what the problem is and you have good information about it, it's tough to do that. That was always a real challenge. It still is.
Yeah. So maybe if you're not the facilitator all the time, if there was somebody you could switch with once in a while, that's usually not the case.
No.
I focus on, like you said, the process, and I do a lot of planning ahead, even just for myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I know when you're facilitating a group of people, you can't plan to the nth degree. I mean, you got to leave some leeway in there for things to happen,
Yep.
for discussions to happen. So you're not holding the reins really tightly, but at least you know the road that you're going to travel on. So if you plan ahead for and get agreement on and alignment with the team on what the scope is, what you're talking about, and how decisions are going to be made,
Mm-hmm.
and how things will be prioritized. If you get on the same page with that early, then the rest of the process you can think about how you're going to collect ideas and how you're going to get everybody on the same page about their own understanding of those ideas, so that in the end everybody can make a decision based on the same understanding
Yep.
of all the ideas as best as you can. And the fun thing about that is that everybody's coming to the table with their own experiences and their own viewpoints of things. And even in the last episode, I think we talked about just some politics,
Mm-hmm.
office politics, silos, and protecting your own department. So you do try to level the playing field when you're facilitating. So that's what I try to do. I try to plan ahead and use some sort of a framework for myself.
No, it makes sense. And you're right. It's if you're coming together and say, all right, here's the issue, here's the evidence, the situation or the decision we need to make. I tend to shy away from saying this is how we're going to do it. It's kind of an aim towards consensus, but it's kind of the majority rules, but it's not a formal vote. I don't know that I'm real good at defining how we're going to make these decisions. Some cases we're making a recommendation with 3 proposals to our director, for example, and then she's going to make the decision.
Yeah, and that's defining how the decision's going to get made.
Right.
Because sometimes if you're in the team and you're facilitating something and everybody comes to maybe 3 proposals, but they have their number one pick.
Mm-hmm.
And if they think that that's the direction the team's going to go, but in actuality, that's going to go to the decider to decide what to do, and the decider picks option number 3, you could have some disappointment, some hard feelings, I don't know, bad mojo going on. So the next time you have to facilitate something, people are a little less willing I
only had that situation once where it was the director said, get the team together and come up with some proposals. Give me pros and cons, what should we do in this situation? And it's rare. I think most directors go, no, you pick. It's like, keep me out of this. I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah. No, you're the smart ones. You go figure it out. And then, let me know what the results are. And I had one boss that would, have us go do that and go, well, why'd you pick that? And then make you defend it. That was kind of odd. But only one time that I have a case where she said, oh, go get some proposals together. And it was more of doing the research for what are the pros and cons and different approaches to solve this particular problem. And it was a bunch of material science type stuff. And it was like, well, there's always a way. It's like software. There's always a way. There's probably more than one. And it was a fun project because there we had to think through what was the strongest arguments, but also what were the downside arguments, and try to balance it. Here's the good things and here's the downside stuff, and then make these 3 recommendations that then would be decided on based on the trade-offs involved. And I thought that was an insight in, dealing with a complicated decision. A lot of times though, it's failure analysis, right? And we're trying to figure out what's a good short-term, long-term solution for it. And
yeah. And another thing that helps besides just, like the planning, is the handy old quality toolbox.
Yeah.
Because there are studies that show that visual models and visual templates, like a fishbone diagram, really do help limit the scope of what it is, so you don't go wild and crazy.
But I love brainstorming. I love wild and crazy brainstorming.
So they define the scope of what you're looking at, and they help people get on the same page with that similar understanding of other people's ideas, and they also provide like a sort of a process for you to move through to help you make a decision.
Yeah.
So those and process flow charts I use pretty commonly.
Yep.
And there's all sorts of other templates and models that you could use. You just have to pick one that fits well with whatever you're trying to do.
I was we didn't call it home and school club for grade school. One of my kids was going to, and somehow I got roped into a semester's worth of those meetings, and I was working from home, and I was taking my kids to preschool and picking them up at school and stuff like that anyway, so I was going to be there. And so I said, yeah, sure, I'll join that. And the homeschool club at one meeting said, oh, we've got an extra, I don't know, $5,000. We got a grant or a gift or whatever. How should we spend this? And immediately the rest of the group started, saying, well, I'd really think we should do this. We should do this. We should do this. And they're all competing ideas. And I'm like, and some were like, wow, we've put this off forever and we got to do it. They were making arguments already for why their idea or suggestion was the one. And like, all right, I got an idea. Let's do a brainstorm. How many are familiar with that? And most of them were some familiarity with it, some not at all, never heard of it. And then, so we had a whiteboard or a chalkboard. This is a long time ago. It was probably a chalkboard. And we just said, it's not time to judge them. I kind of laid the rules for the brainstorm real quick. And we ended up with like 35 ideas how to spend this windfall we had. And I just wrote them down real quick. And then one of them said, now what do we do? And I says, well, now we do multi-voting. And nobody had heard of that. It says, we have 35 things. And I did a quick calculation. It says, you each get 5 votes, right? Pick the 5 things that you would be okay with us going forward with and considering then which one we would do. And do it silently, write down your 5 choices. And then we tallied them up and put little marks next to each one. And it became very, very clear. There was like 2 front runners that were, think Pareto, right? There was just a big tail of everything got a vote except one, which happened to be one of the big arguments right at the start. Oh, we really, really got to do this. And she didn't even vote for it.
Nobody voted for it?
She didn't even vote for it. The person that suggested it really wanted it.
Well, when you see the other people's ideas, I guess.
Exactly. It was visual. It was in front of you. It wasn't a free-for-all discussion where things get, forgotten very, very quickly. They were all on the board. And we did the votes, and one of them ended up with like 25 votes, or not 25. There were like 8 people in the room, but 2 of them had the dominant number of votes, and then the rest of them were scattered. And I don't remember the details now. But then the decision and the discussion focused on the pros and cons of the 2 most consensus approval. These are the 2 things that we collectively want to go do. And it moved forward really, really quickly after that. And it was part teach. And then one of them, the principal was there, and he said, how did you know how to do that? And I said, that's what I do, day in, day out as an engineer, is we work with people and try to find common ground and solutions to problems and stuff like that. And I was really afraid that he was going to say, oh, you need to run the homeschool club for the rest of the year. Like, oh, no. I'm out of here. I got to go take my kid home.
There's something about when you come up with an idea and then you start to present it, it becomes yours.
Yes.
And then you become really protective of it. And you want to stick with it and like put your stake in the ground. But when you come up with ideas and then you put it out somewhere for everyone else to see, and you see other people's ideas, it's no longer your idea. It's are ideas. So I think it takes some of the personal stakes, personal identity out of it. It removes that link from the ideas and puts it more into the group sphere
Yep.
so that the group can then make a decision. I mean, and then you're still individually, like you use multi-voting, you're still individually contributing and as to what you think is best, but you're removing that connection to the idea so that you can merge or choose different ideas. And that's what's kind of nice with that.
Well, the visualization is a key part. It becomes the chalkboard has all the ideas. It's not my idea that I have to keep in the conversation. It's on the board. It's everybody sees it.
And there's a design sprint. Now, this is not like agile sprint software stuff, but design sprint, where they want to take an idea to a user prototype mock-up in 4 days. Okay. And then they test on the 5th day. And what they do is they have technical people, engineers, a cross-functional team. And day one is getting alignment and what's the problem we need to solve and stuff. But the middle stuff is what I think is really interesting because everyone will sketch out ideas and then they post the ideas on the board for everybody to see. So again, it's taking that, hey, I have this sketch design idea, and sometimes they'll do multi-voting with that. So they're not just picking a design, but they may be picking a feature about that design that they really like.
Okay.
So you'll be voting on that and collecting, and then you iterate on that. And then they still limit they use templates, I guess, but they're still limiting the scope and the amount of time that people are able to come up with ideas. That's the other thing that I've seen a lot of people do is they don't just give unlimited time. They limit the amount of time to come up with ideas to kind of keep things moving and to gather information off the top of people's heads or their first reactions. So those are good ideas to just get everyone's ideas, like you said, on the chalkboard, on the whiteboard,
on the wall. Yeah.
On the wall.
So it's not a good practice when you do a brainstorming, when you hear the idea that you really, really like, to cut off the brainstorming and say, all right, let's go forward.
No,
that's not good.
Yeah.
There's something to that making it visual, getting it on the board. And maybe I'm just the curmudgeon, but the folks that want to put it on a screen on the wall, that's, it's a 14-inch TV monitor, and they're trying to put everything up on that on an Excel sheet. They're writing down all the brainstorm ideas on a spreadsheet, and it's in micro print unless you're standing within 3 inches of the screen. And I said, why don't we just put that on Post-it? No, I'll capture it on online here and on screen. If you're going to put it on the wall, make sure that screen is as big as the wall. It's like, I saw way too many places that, we'll just write it down here and everybody can see it. And it says, does everybody have a telescope? It's like,
but now, with teams being remote, so you may have a workforce or a team and they're all over the place and you have to rely on virtual tools, but there's still virtual whiteboards and virtual Post-it notes that you're not like tangibly writing, but you can still like grab the Post-it note virtually and move it around if you want to.
You can annotate it. Yeah, there's some some pretty cool tools. I've also seen recently I was involved with a team that was using Google Meet. And the most common phrase was from the person that was managing the meeting and the whiteboard and the notes and what files were on the screen and, kind of controlling the stage was, one moment, please. One moment, please. And as she was trying to figure out how to do that step or find that document or whatever, we spent a good half hour of a 2-hour meeting with, one moment, please.
What was the hang up? Just being able to transition or?
Yeah, it was, and it was like, oh, we have a document on that. I don't care if we have a document on it or not. It was in the reading packet. We all should be familiar with it. And she wanted to put it on the screen and block the conversation until it was on the screen. And then it's in microprint. And it's like, well, how can you make that bigger? One moment, please. And 2 minutes later, it'd be bigger. And it was, part of it was if you're going to facilitate, you really need to know your tools, whether it's online or in the room or whatever. If you're going to do brainstorming and use Post-it notes, have Post-it notes, have marked Sharpies so that you can write in broad strokes so that other people can read it from a distance and stuff like that. Is the ability to facilitate well is an art. There's no doubt about it. And understanding and using the tools correctly is a big piece of that. So as an individual contributor or a member of a team that has an identified facilitator, cut them some slack, help them. It's not an easy job.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
and then the other thing is if, the team comes up with ideas or, hey, there's an action plan to that. Just the following up and following through later.
Yep.
I guess that's an important step that sometimes got me hung up because I just assumed that, everybody had bought in and they were good to go and the action plan is ready to go. But then when I would follow up, somebody said, well, I have these other work responsibilities and my boss told me that this one is lowest on priority.
Yeah.
So I'm not doing it. So just, part of facilitating, I guess, with that is just the follow up and follow through later to make sure that the things that happened in the meeting are happening. And that could just be a simple phone call or an email or a check-in, right?
Well, we got so many options now. It could be a Slack. It could be, this text message,
a Zoom.
Quick Zoom call, a shared whiteboard that's, ongoing, shared chat from a Zoom meeting. I've seen those. We could brainstorm probably 47 different ways to stay in touch with other people.
Well, I'm not prepared with a whiteboard, Fred. Okay. We can't do that.
Okay.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Let's plan for that meeting.
That's it. Yeah. At some level, just the facilitating a meeting or an FMEA and stuff like that, it picks up a whole pile of roles that we play that are often called project management. It becomes a project. If you've got action items and they need follow-up, that's why I've never been interested in becoming a project manager, because in my opinion, they are the circus master that's saying, all right, and in stage one, we're doing this and stage two is doing that, and kind of taking cues and what's on display and what's priorities and what gets, talked about. Yet they didn't put pencil to paper to design one widget on the whole system. Yet it is a critical role to make things get done and to help foster the, accomplishing the objectives. And so if we're doing failure analysis, and you got a fix that you want to implement, it doesn't happen by itself. That's project management stuff to make it happen. And some organizations are much better at it than others. There's no doubt about it. Again, that's where the influence part comes in. If you're trying to encourage and influence people to actually do the things that need to get done to solve the problem or whatever.
That's a good point about project management, that if you're trying to be a good facilitator, those kind of skills will only help you, not only in managing the facilitation itself, but then understanding the other moving parts. Yep. And how whatever you're doing is affecting the other pieces that are trying to move. And it just gives you a little more respect for your teammates too, with the kinds of projects they're working on or the timelines.
Yep, all the various constraints are real, and ignoring them doesn't help.
I remember, I think pretty early on in my career, when I was working, I took classes, continuing education class, I suppose, on project management. And if you haven't yet, I would recommend that.
Yeah, no, I agree. there's a whole set of skills there that, because a lot of what we do in quality and reliability ends up being in the realm of project management, program management type stuff. It's just the nature of our work. That might be a subject for a whole other discussion, is, the project management skills and what are the key ones to pay attention to, or where to get more info on it. I think there's a PMP's project management professional certification.
Yes.
There's a whole professional society just on that. But let's save that for another day. So anyway, we talked about all kinds of cool stuff. I think my big takeaway and reinforcement was make it visual.
Yeah.
A great facilitation technique is make it visual, get it on the wall, get it on the screen, if it can be read. And be cautious about switching from facilitator to influencer. If you really need to focus on facilitation, focus on that, plan for it, do it. If you're a contributor in your own right at that particular team, is make it clear which role you're in to the rest of the team. I think that helps clear up a lot of confusion and suspected bias on the outcomes. If you're trusting the facilitator to get to a group decision, yet if they're playing the role of dictator, then it's probably not going to be a trusted outcome.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So, and there's all kinds of other nuances and issues and problems. And I think between the two of us, I lost count. I think we ended up with 35 different scenarios and memories and things to go. And we're just getting started.
Well, it's a big part of working. And like you said, it's a big part of being a reliability engineer and also a quality engineer. Spanning the team and finding solutions and continuously improving things and root cause analysis. Those are all good team activities that need a facilitator.
Yep. So at this point, if you're listening to this, if you're listening to us going, I don't do no facilitating, I fill out the paperwork. Well, you could really enhance your career by doing so. So, pick up some of those skills and take the lead on occasion and give it a shot and see just how difficult it really is. And it's technically difficult, in my opinion. Yet you can learn it. You can master it. If you can learn how to brainstorm or do a multi-voting, you can learn how to facilitate. It's something we can do and should do in our roles. So if you're got some ideas or concepts or a good story, success story of applying some of your engineering talent to solve a problem or facilitating a meeting to get a great outcome, let us know. Dianna, we don't get enough success stories. We get questions that are interesting and so on. I appreciate that. But a couple of success stories would be cool.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of common, right?
Yeah.
People tell you about the bad things. We're looking for answers, which is fine, which is good. But yeah, success stories are also welcome.
Yeah, also welcome. So head over to accendoreliability.com/go/SOR. Couple of ways to get in touch with us there. Dianna and I and the other hosts are available through LinkedIn and our About pages. And we always are open to questions and ideas and suggestions. And questions we try to answer right away or give you some feedback or direction to go with that. And if we find that we have learned something by talking to one of the other hosts on the show, you might just get a follow-up saying, let me put an addendum on that because we talked about it and here's some other ideas for you. So you get more than one thought process on or response sometimes. So anyway, looking forward for your comments and questions. And thanks so much, Dianna, for helping me walk through this. I always find it a dilemma, playing a role while also being a contributor in a meeting.
Yeah, that would be difficult.
Yeah.
But I really liked hearing your suggestion of just physically moving. I think that's pretty cool. I'll have to give that a try.
Yeah, it's hard to do when you're on remote. You can change the angle of your camera or actually put on a hat or something like that.
Like your facilitation, you're front facing, but then if you put on your engineering hat, you're like the side view.
Yeah, you do.
You're having a side conversation.
Yeah. Well, that's an idea. Yeah.
Or you just turn your chair and look to the side.
That we might have to, look into that. How do you play different roles in a remote meeting? There's got to be a technique for that works.
All sorts of ideas you could do.
Yeah.
You could literally get different hats.
Yeah. Or different, sweater, put your sweater on or take it off. Or
different background.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, geez. Oh, let's brainstorm this sometime. Looking forward to that.
Okay, me too.
Thanks, Dianna. We'll talk to you again soon.
Okay. Bye, Fred.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation. If you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show, please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.